The other thing I noticed with tuna, like because like you said, like Melbourne Spearos have like South Australian Spearos, I think have been spearing southern bluefin tuna for a bit longer, but the Melbourne
Mm,
crew kind of got onto it only really recently in the last sort of like you said, sort of 5 or 6 years for the most part. Learning
yeah.
how to care for a tuna is a bit different than learning how to care for a kingy or some of your dusky morwong and other illustrious Melbourne species.
Illustrious fish.
Yeah,
Got to watch out for them.
talk to us about so you shoot a southern bluefin tuna, right? I mean, we're going to talk about gear too, hopefully, so we might go backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, you shoot one, you land it. What are we doing? I've got that fish in my arms. It's still struggling. I've got a hand in its gills, which I understand is
So,
quite hard to
so
do.
yeah. So it's a very interesting fish. It's to try and actually get your hands onto them because when you're fighting them, they often allow themselves to be brought up relatively easily. And then as soon as you put your hand on the spear or touch their tail trying to grab them, they will go for a blistering run. And so they fight really hard. So I mean, we could talk a little bit about gear because I've shot tuna with real guns and with breakaway setups and with traditional setups where you've got your spear, which is attached to your shooting line, which is attached to your gun, and then your float line.
Hmm.
Definitely the most preferred way is the breakaway setup. So for those listeners that you're not sure what that means, is it means that the spear that you've got on your spear gun has got the shooting line, and that shooting line can be mono or cable in some cases or Dyneema. And then you've got your float line attached directly to your shooting line. And what that means is when you shoot that spear and it hits the fish, your float line will follow that fish, and you've got your gun in your hand. So you'll swim up and then either clip your gun onto your float or give your gun to the guy on the boat, and then you can proceed in fighting the fish. So it removes it removes another break in the chain. So wherever you have joints, knots, clips, anything like that, that's a point of failure.
Hmm.
So the more of those points that we can remove, the better, especially when it comes to big fish. Now the advantage with bluefin is that they fight relatively clean. They're not like doggies or kingfish that will find a rock in the middle of anywhere and wrap itself around it 20 times and then tear off, and now you're sitting with a shaft in the in 30-40 meters of water. So they fight, they just go down, is what tuna do. They go down pretty hard. And so you've got to obviously lift them up. The one thing that you need to be mindful of with tuna is line management, um, especially if you're using a real gun, but even normal float line, because they go for those blistering runs. If you're bringing the line up, what you want to do is you want to keep on swimming, um, and as you swim, the line's obviously going behind you. Now, the one thing that some of you might not be aware of is that tuna, towards the end of their fight, they start doing like these large circles.
Yeah.
The hard part of those circles is that you're looping yourself in your own float line.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be very careful about the possibly like that last 10-15% of your fight, because the fish is like, it's hard for you to dictate where that fish is going because they're so powerful. So you're going to be going around in circles, and there's a really good chance you're going to get wrapped up in your float line. So
Well,
for any of you that look at targeting bluefin tuna, that's something that either you need to be very mindful of, or the buddy that's with you in the water can help you manage it and try and help you. Like I've had someone on the boat pulling some of the float line up and just kind of neatening it up and getting it ready in case it goes for another run. So there's definitely you've got to think about those kind of aspects to the fight so that you make it safe for yourself. The last part of that fight is obviously you want to, depending on the size of the fish, you can sometimes get the fish in your hands and just bear hug it and go for the tuna rodeo, which is very entertaining to watch if you're the person on the boat. Uh,
awkward if they've got a shaft sticking through them too, though, because you get stabbed with your own shaft. And
yeah,
if you've never done any boxing and you're not used to protecting your chin, like like 100 kilo tuna smashing its face into your jaw could quite easily give you a lights out moment too, I'd imagine.
but it's even just a tail. It's vibrating
Yeah,
at such a
yeah.
pace. So my personal preference is when you're hunting tuna, it's really a team sport. It's not an individual sport, which is why I couldn't claim my record on
140.
my fish, because it was my first time going for barrels. I hadn't really tried, like I'd shot smaller school fish, but I hadn't really chased barrels, and this is my first time in the water. And previously I shot and lost an even bigger fish, which is why when I shot this one, I thought, oh, it's big, but it's not record big. So it was for me. I viewed it as a team sport, and I was in the water. I had a friend of mine in the water, Aaron, who I think you might have chatted to before, and so he was helping me with it. So it's really a team sport. It's the person on the boat that's protecting you as the divers, making sure no fisherman is going to be trawling their lines over your head. And your buddy making sure that you're okay. If you need anything, they can hand you a second gun, a third gun, or whatever. But those bigger fish you really want to dispatch with a second or third gun. And the best is to have almost like a kill gun that's dedicated for it, where you don't have a flopper on it. So if you shoot for the brain, and if you miss, you can just pull that shaft straight back out, and you can reload and try for that kill shot again. Because a fish that size, I think you'd be risking a lot to put your hands on it if it wasn't if you hadn't stoned it.
Yeah, right. So you're taking a precise second shot, trying to stone the fish, and that way you're not dealing with 144 kilos of aggression,
angry fish.
Yeah.
So, but once you have it, so those smaller fish, like you might try and grab it with your hands, and it's definitely possible. But what they tend to like. Their gills are, everything about a tuna is streamlined. Like you look at it and it's just designed for speed. It's got these massive muscles, this really thick tail. It's designed to move. The pectoral fins fold into its body. It's got little grooves that it folds in. So it's a really majestic fish, and everything about it is sleek. So even for you to get your hands in the gills, those gills come down so tight. It's really hard to get your hands in there. And also once your hands are in there, they've got these almost like grates that can really mess up your fingers a fair bit. But once your hands are in it, that's when you've got control. Is once you've got your hands in the gills, that's when you're going to have the best control on the fish.
And bleeding them, so if it's hard to get access with your hand, is bleeding them still the same?
Yeah, so bleeding them, there's a few different techniques that you can, for the listeners, they can watch some of the stuff on YouTube with what some of the fishermen do. So there's a vein that runs just down from the pectoral fin down the center of the fish. It's very shallow, so it's like less than a centimeter deep is the cut that you have to make, and so you can start bleeding it there. Something that I've started to do a bit more recently is when I've got my hand in the gills, is I'll actually take my knife and run it along the gills, and then start pulling out some of the gills with my hands to start it bleeding out at multiple areas, so that as much of the blood can come out because obviously the blood will congeal and get quite thick, and it won't, like if you try and bleed a fish that's been on ice for like a couple of hours, it's not really going to bleed well. So you really want to bleed it as quickly as possible, and spend that time. Once you have that fish in your hand, spend that time there. You can have a rope that's set up on the boat that you can tail wrap the fish. So obviously you're not going to lose it, and then you can start the bleeding, processing the fish, so that when you get it onto the boat, again, there's less tuna blood on the boat, because tuna blood is sticky and it doesn't smell great after a couple of weeks. But you can start processing the fish, and then I'd recommend even just gutting it, so that when you get it in your bag with the ice, that you can actually get some ice into the stomach cavity, into the gill cavity, and really drop that temperature. Because when they fight, they're just muscle, so they heat up tremendously. So the quicker you can lower that temperature, the better. You'll see, what I've seen in some of the big kind of more commercial operations is they'll actually tail wrap the fish and drag it behind the boat, and let that it bleeds it out and it cools it down relatively quick, and then obviously they'll get it on a bit of an ice slurry as quick as they can.